now. We're now live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. A few notes from me before we start. First of all, happy New Year. Nice to see everybody. Just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. It's being conducted in accordance with the Council's remote meetings protocol and procedure. Please can I ask that you raise your virtual hands if you'd like to make any comments. Please can I ask that microphones are switched off when not speaking, and it's our preference that cameras are left on, but we understand that if that is affecting your ability to be here, then obviously cameras can go off if there's internet problems. Voting is via general assent and is particularly complicated today, so we'll tackle that when we get there. Various people only able to vote on certain items on one of the agenda items. So if we can go to agenda item 1, apologies for absence and substitute members. I know we've just been through that, but now we're live. Jamie, just want to repeat the apologies for us.
I've received apologies from Stuart Bevan and Councillor Bailey.
And I've received an email from Tim from Ranelagh. He may be late and may not be able to join us at all. And no substitute members that we're aware of?
No, non-notified. Okay,
thank you very much. If you're then able to take the attendance from the list of names in the meeting. Okay, agenda item number 2 is declaration of interest. Oh, sorry, I've got a note here. Actually, that Stuart Bevan is resigning from his role as Academy member. So we'll have another vacancy for Academy members. So there's probably an item there for Liz and I to pick up just to try and recruit and fill that vacancy. And I think we've already got an Academy vacancy, Paul, is that right?
I checked this. No, you haven't. This is the only one now. I think Stuart filled the vacancy last time. So
okay,
because he switched from a maintained school to an academy.
Lovely. Okay, so one vacancy to recruit you for academies. Thank you. Item 2 then is declarations of interest. We don't think there are any specifics, but just a reminder that if you do feel there is a declaration to be made, please do so at any point during the meeting. Item number 3 then, on to the minutes. Are we all happy to record the minutes as an accurate representation of the meeting? I'm seeing lots of nods. Thank you very much. There are 2 matters arising. The first one is on page 4 of the meeting pack, which was an action for Paul to send out the feedback from the consultation. And Paul, I think I've received that as a head teacher, so are we happy that that's been done?
Yeah, I sent an email out to head teachers, chairs of governors and bursars at the beginning of the week.
Lovely, so that's complete. And then there was a second matter arising, and that was Gráinne volunteered to compile some of the concerns that schools have got around safety valve and then submit them to political leaders. And Paul, I think that was in the same email that heads were asked for to feed back to you about any particular concerns that we wanted putting in.
Yes, that's
right.
Yeah,
we're comfortable in sending the letter out to seek some political favour or interest once we get a little bit more information about what the concerns of head teachers are.
Lovely, thank you very much. And then I've got a note here, Gráinne, about an update on the safety valve. Do you want to pick that up now or under the budget item?
Well, it's up to you, Chair. Happy to do either.
I think let's go ahead because that item's pretty confusing for voting. So we'll take the safety valve now if you're happy.
Yeah. Okay. So, so I just felt it would be helpful given the length of the discussion we had last time and all of the issues and the work that everybody's been undertaken to get the safety valve submission prepared, and just to let you all know that it was submitted on the 15th of December. Over the Christmas period, Chief Exec and the Deputy Chief Exec Stewart, Section 151 officer, they received queries, responded to the queries. We've continued to have conversations, and we're in a position where we have got a final proposal and plan in terms of what the financials are looking like for submission. So we are in a position now, after agreement at full council last night, we are in a position to submit the safety valve formal application tomorrow. So that's just to give you the information. So there is a range of public information in the report last night, and obviously information you've got enclosed. In terms of next steps, obviously we're not going to hear for a couple of months, probably some point in March. But we are going to continue to do the work on the implementation plan. Then what we have committed, so firstly we do need to share what that final plan was, and again bring in the governors and head teachers in some joined up meetings again, just to go through that with everybody. We're doing that at the moment with the officers in the council, because we haven't shared that in detail a little bit before Christmas. So we are looking at those opportunities for familiarisation, and then we'll be developing up the implementation plans for each of those interventions. So I think you'd already indicated that people are comfortable with being part of that, and Dwayne and Kelly will be organising that in the background. So implementation will continue, or now start formally. Once the plan's submitted, we're not going to wait until March.
Thank you, Gráinne. And presumably the plan was submitted without any changes. We're fully up to date with what was in there.
So no changes to the interventions, no.
Yeah.
So it's just the financial analysis. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, 2 questions for members. And has anybody got anything they'd like to ask Gráinne, or are there any other matters arising from the minutes? I can't see any hands going up. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on to item number 4, which is proposals for the early years budget. And Cherry, I think we're coming to you.
I think you are, yes. Thank you, Stuart. Good afternoon, everybody. This year's early years block budget is significantly different than previous years due to all of the expansions that are happening. Hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at the paper, but I'll just pick out some of the key bits, and then if there's any questions, please ask. We received some additional money that we weren't expecting, the teachers' pay and pension money. So we had some which was for the teachers' pay for the autumn term. So my understanding is that's already been paid out to those settings that were eligible for that block amount during the autumn term, well, autumn and spring terms. And then we have some more for the 24-25 financial arrangements, which again will be paid in block amounts each term to those eligible settings. So that's something different than we've had previously. So eligible settings, they have to employ a teacher who is directly delivering the EYFS to nursery age children for the majority of their day, and obviously claiming the early years funding. So that is a different pot of money than we've had previously. Our early years block of the DSG is estimated to be considerably more than it has been in previous years due to the expansion of the entitlements starting in April. So from April this year, we will be tasked with finding 15 hours per 2-year-old child of working parents. And then from September, that will increase to the term after children turn 9 months old. So for the rest of the financial year, it will be from September, it will be for children the term after they're 9 months old, up to 3. That's the additional one, and that is for working families. And then next year that will move up to 30 hours from September 2025. So it's quite a significant expansion in delivery. The rates have increased slightly, as you will be able to see from the tables. I think the one confusing rate that we've discussed with our early years forum. So we'd been told that we'd get our amount of, know what our money was by the end of November. It arrived on the 29th, so it was by the end of November, but it's been quite a lot of work to get this done. Unfortunately, it wasn't in time for us to go through it in detail with our early years forum, but we did talk about the potential indicative rates to them, and agreed with our early years forum that we would keep the formula the same as we've got at the moment, because there wasn't time to consult with all of our providers. Hopefully we will look at consulting with all of our providers next year once we've started to implement this, to make sure that the formula that we're currently operating is still fit for purpose, but there wasn't time for that this time. So the 2-year-old rates, there will be 2 different 2-year-old pots of money, because we've currently got the disadvantaged 2-year-olds and then the new working element 2-year-olds starting from April. So we've made the decision in consultation with the Early Years Forum that we would have one base rate for all of our 2-year-olds, but the disadvantaged 2-year-old cohort, most of them will attract the Early Years pupil premium, so it will be an extra £2 on top of the base rate, which will make the amount more than it currently is. It's just been quite a confusing one to look at. And then as we move forward to September, obviously there's then an under 2s hourly rate as well. The other difference that has come forward now is that for all entitlements, all children, if they're eligible, we will be paying early years pupil premium for all ages, right from the term after 9 months up till the end of their nursery time. And also our Disability Access Fund, which previously has only been for 3 and 4-year-olds, will be for any child in receipt of disability living allowance from when they start nursery. So there's quite a lot of changes that are happening, and quite a lot of work that's been going on in the background to get to this stage. Just checking to see if there were any other key. The other key thing that we're doing at the moment, which is touched on in this paper, but we're not in a position to bring it all to you, is that in the statutory guidance, they are recommended that we consult with our providers around payments and around monthly payments. When we did that the last time, the majority said they wanted to keep the payments as we do at the moment, with 60% up front and then 40% at the actual payment. What we've decided to do this time is consult with our childminders, because for childminders, once this entitlement fully comes in, most of their income will come from funded children. So there was an appetite from childminders to consult. So we've been working with a working group, and we've literally just tweaked the consultation. So that will be going out to childminders in the next couple of weeks. And so hopefully we'll bring that proposal back to the forum in March to say this is what the childminders would like to do. So that one's a little bit on the back foot, but just because we haven't had the time to do that ready for this meeting. We're going to have to do head counts each term, because obviously at the moment we've got an indicative amount of 2-year-olds that they're expecting us to have, and again with the 9-month-olds, but we don't know what the take-up's going to be like yet. So we're going to be doing termly head counts, and then obviously we will do budget adjustments as we need to once we know what the take-up is of the entitlements. So I think that's probably the gist of the report. I don't know if anybody's got any particular questions that I might or might not be able to answer.
Any questions?
I like the silence. Thank you.
So just I guess to ask, are there any concerns in here that we need to be aware about? Is there anything that's worrying?
For me, I think one of the concerns, and we're working on this at the moment, is the places. Will we have capacity for places? We've received data from the DFE, which at the moment they're saying we do have enough capacity. We have questioned some of the data that they have, and I think one of the difficulties, and I'm sure that Sue can back me up on this, one of the difficulties that settings are having, as are schools, is recruitment. So some settings are saying to me that they are full, but actually they're full to the capacity of their staffing rather than the capacity of their building. So we are going to be going out. So we've had some additional resource come in, a grant, so it's not part of the DSG, to support the rollout of the expansion. So we are going to be advertising for a sufficiency manager to really get out there and find out what the supply and demand is, because we've got we know a lot of the supply. What we don't know is the demand. So we're hoping to recruit to that post within the next few weeks. That will give us a much better understanding of where we are and what we need. We also do have, or we will be having, a capital grant that's coming forward again to support this, but we need to do the work to know where the demand is and what the supply is before we look at the capital. So yes, I would say those are my concerns at the moment, Stuart, if I'm honest.
Okay, thank you. Grant, you've got your hand up.
Thanks. Thanks for your work on this, Cherry. I mean, obviously the increase is welcome, isn't it? For those of us that run nurseries, and I suspect for private providers even more essential, because I realise they're probably in a worse position than schools are. The one thing that actually, one of my concerns actually, is actually around nursery attendance and the impact that's having, where some attendance is becoming a pattern, which then falls foul of the funding rules, because it looks like parents are not taking up their 5 days of places, and it's actually becoming 4 days, which actually, in theory, we're supposed to. Well, not in theory. The reality is we're supposed to actually then not get the funding for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that really is concerning me. So the pattern we're seeing in school, where people are, picking and choosing when they're coming, that for me is a real concern, because it starts to mean that we're paying for staff full time. We've got no ability to lay people off for a day, but actually we're not necessarily able to keep the funding. And we do get obviously emails from the local authority reminding us about, patterns of attendance and things like that. So, and I think that what at point does it tip from, the parent using their funding elsewhere, as opposed to simply deciding that actually it's a nice thing to have, I can 4 days a week, but the other, I quite fancy taking to the park on the 5th day. And I do think some better guidance about when schools and providers fall foul of that rule, because it does, we're seeing an increasing number acting like that, which actually increases our costs against income.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. I suppose from our point of view and from the statutory guidance, it is participation-based funding. So parents, they sign up for, they do their parent declaration form for whatever sessions they're going to be doing, and there's an expectation that they're attending on those sessions they've signed up for. Obviously, there's sickness, there's holiday, there's that, but when it's a regular non-attendance, that's an issue. Lots of, but again, it's about your business model as an organisation and making that very clear to families. And I know sometimes when we talk to schools about it being a business, it's a bit of a challenge, but it is, for all intents and purposes, it's a business. And parents have to understand that if they're coming to you, if your offer is 5 mornings or 5 afternoons or 5 full days, that is the expectation, whereas another provider might enable a flexible model. And I know that's really difficult because, again, the costs. But yeah, I mean, I can take that away and we can look at that. But I mean, we go by the statutory guidance, and it is participation based. And we did go back to the DFE recently on a similar issue, and they came back with the statement that we were to use. So, but I'll take that away, Grant, and we'll have some more conversation about it.
Okay, thanks, Cherry. Are there any other comments?
Just thank you to Cherry and her team, because I know how much work Cherry, David and her team do for us, and the support they give us day in, day out. It is, a time of change, which is always concerning for providers. So I'd just like to say, thank you to Cherry and her team for always being there and supporting us.
Thank you, Sue.
Well said, thank you. Okay, can I ask you to look at page 7 of your pack to the recommendations, and we're going to do the first 2 together. They both 2.1 and 2.2 relating to the teacher pay award. Does anybody disagree? Okay, 2.1 and 2.2 are agreed. Can we look at 2.3, which is the early years budget proposal? Does anybody disagree with 2.3? 2.3 is agreed. And then the final point, 2.4, is to note the council's plan to consult with childminders about the monthly payments. And I think we can note that consultation will happen.
Thank you.
In that case, thank you very much, Cherry.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 5, schools block and central services budgets. Paul, is this you?
Yes, please, Stu, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, this is an annual paper and it's the main budget setting paper for the schools budget and the central school services budget as well. So it basically builds in the number of decisions that have been taken so far today, and it also adds in now those other decisions that we need to take in the context of having all the information we need to set the budget now that the DfE have released the data set, which came out on the 16th of December. So this is the point we have all that information in one place. So it does follow a normal sort of pattern. Obviously, the big difference this year is that we have obviously built in some work around the safety valve, and that's obviously had some financial implications, and they were discussed in more detail at the last meeting of the forum. The other thing is that we have got, as Stuart mentioned at the start, we have got to look at some selective recommendations based on the outcomes from the consultation last autumn. If you remember, they were reported to the forum last year, but we weren't asking for any decisions at that time, because it was, again, that was wrapped in with our wider work with the safety valve and wanting to present all the decisions together in one go for you rather than taking some in isolation. So that basically comes back with those asking to make the decisions on the budget, and that's the complicated part, because some of those decisions impact only on a specific group of schools, and therefore only those specific school representatives vote on those matters. So the recommendations at 3.1 outline the questions that are being asked for decision, and it does actually say there who should be voting. So if anyone's not clear on who they should be voting at that point in time, I suggest that we would clarify that then. So that's the issue there. And in respect of those consultation questions, we are asking you to agree all of the majority responses from the consultation, apart from one, which relates to the minimum funding guarantee. So that's the increase, or that's to be applied a minimum amount between 23-24 and 24-25. So when we did that consultation, we weren't aware of what was happening on the safety valve proposal. So we put forward the normal proposal to increase that at the highest rate that we're allowed to, but 0.5%. But now when we've gone through those calculations, and this was in advance of the safety valve consultation, the cost of implementing a minimum funding guarantee at 0.5% is £123,000, and that is financed by deduction from other schools that have positive increases. And looking at the figures, if it was just a 0%, so the funding rate was exactly the same, it would only be £41,000, and that impacts on 3 schools, all of which have had large increases in pupil numbers. So their cash values are going up, it's just the amount per pupil that's not going up. So taking account of the other changes in the budget, we are actually proposing that the minimum funding guarantee only goes up by 0%. It stays the same. So we would have put that in our consultation in the autumn term if we had all the information, but it wasn't available then. And the block transfer top slice consultation, the illustrative figures of that contribution were based on a 0% MFG as well. So it's consistent with that. So it's just that some bits of information weren't available at the time that we did the initial consultation. So that's the only reason why that's different. But hopefully that explains why it's not what the majority view of schools were coming back with. So in terms of the actual budget setting process itself, there's no new budget issues to deal with. It's just going through the updated confirmed dedicated school grants allocation, so the funding from the government, and also the data set that I mentioned came out with the October 23 information. So the key parts of that is that there has been another increase in pupil numbers in secondary schools, just over 2%. primary pupil numbers are basically unchanged, so there's no impact on the finances for primary schools. But as per usual, we've had a big increase in the additional educational needs data that attached to relevant pupils. So that's things like English as additional language, low prior attainment scores, free school meals eligibility. So those eligibilities are increasing, and that means that triggers more funding for school. But with the lagged funding that we get through the dedicated schools grant and the government, the local authority is still funded on the October 22 numbers. So when those eligibilities are going up, we don't have enough money to fully fund those increases, but we have to use that data in our allocation to schools. So that, as I said, there's been a number of changes in the DSG. There's been a number of changes in the proposals on the budget. Building those all together, looking at that additional cost of the educational needs, that's gone up £301,000, but the proposals here in front of you allow for all of that to be funded apart from £67,000. So most of it is, but it's not all possible to fund that, and that's down to the lagged funding that we get from the DFE. In terms of the impact on individual school budgets, I think we talked last time about the overall financial settlement, looking at about a 1.7% increase in per pupil funding from the DFE. Running that comes out an average of 1.8%, but then there's the block transfer reduces that down to a 1.4% increase on average for schools. One of the other things to bear in mind, and there's another recommendation on the paper, is that whilst the block transfer was agreed at the last meeting of the forum, we still need to get consent from the Secretary of State because the amount that we're asking to transfer exceeds the limit that's set locally, so it's above a 0.5% level. So we have to put that request in to grant that permission, and we're not likely to hear that until February or March time. So we will proceed on calculating budgets on the basis that that is agreed. We will send out, as per usual, indicative budgets to schools later this month, but they will obviously be a bit more provisional than normal because they could still be some impact from that decision, although we're not going to know that until March, as I said. Just also in the paper, there are a few other decisions that the Schools Forum makes in a legal status, and that's set out in the recommendations as well. And I think that just about covers the overall paper. There's a lot of detail there, but I'm not proposing to go into any more, but obviously happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And yeah, just a couple of comments. I understand that the late information coming to you must put a pressure on you and your team. So thank you for the report and all that you're doing in the background. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, but I think it is worth recording that the 1.7 inflationary increase for schools is very concerning to us. Exactly as we said last time, I don't quite understand how that's going to cover costs. We did the safety valve last time, but that headline figure is a real worry to schools, and it's even more worrying because it gives me concerns about the implication for pay awards, what level they will be, and the implications if they're not keeping up with inflation. So I know that's outside of the council's control, but I think we've got to express our concerns about that inflationary increase and the consequences that has for schools and our pupils. Grant.
Thanks. Yeah, Paul, can I just say, record my thanks for the work you and your team have done to prepare this with all the late changes. Could I just clarify about the minimum funding guarantee? Is the implication of what you said right at the beginning then that there are some schools in the borough, admittedly a small number, that are effectively going to get a per pupil funding which is less than the minimum because of the safety valve? Is that have I understood that implication correctly?
Not quite, no. Right. There are two funding protections. So the minimum per pupil cash value, all three schools exceed that value. They'll get that amount topped up. But what you can also have is a change in per pupil funding from last year to this year, Where you have a high increase in pupil numbers, some of the add-ons, like the additional educational needs, may not follow the same as your normal profile. And also things like the fixed lump sum allocation that goes out to all schools, the more pupils you have on that, the lower amount per pupil that equates to. So when you do that calculation on a per pupil basis, the more pupils you get enrolled, that can start to come down. It doesn't mean to say you're necessarily financially disadvantaged. It's just because you have a big increase in your pupil numbers, it quickly erodes the value of that fixed lump sum allocation. So that's the reason, and that's the reason why these three schools we're talking about here have been caught up in this, is because they've all had relatively large increases in pupil numbers. So that's the reason why that is. They've met the minimum per pupil levels on all counts, but they've got a bigger cash increase because of their numbers are going up.
Okay, so the change doesn't mean that any school is below the minimum. It might what you're effectively saying is they might have got a little bit more than they're actually going to get by the impact. Okay. So I think that's the key thing for me. I was a little bit uncomfortable with the idea that, and I suppose my just follow-up question is that if they hadn't had these big increases in the pupil numbers, actually, I'm just thinking about in the future, if they hadn't had these big, and what would have been the implication of that to the budget? Would we still have to have found a large amount of money?
The way it goes at the moment is that the cost of funding that minimum per pupil funding guarantee from other schools is met by giving the schools with an increase a lower amount. So it's not a case of finding more money. It's the schools with the highest increases will get a lower share of that.
My concern actually is that if the money is being found from school budgets, in order to fund the minimum funding guarantee, and pupil numbers across the borough are not increasing, so that some schools, there isn't this sort of big increase in numbers. At some point, in order to maintain the minimum funding, isn't the danger that you're going to come and ask schools for more money from their budgets?
I think if numbers stay static or they start to go down, I don't think that'll be an issue, because as I said, the impact of the fixed lump sum will still be the same, and that's the issue that's affecting these three schools this year. Because they're big increases, they're getting a lower amount of per pupil funding from that funding allocation when we do the calculation. So it's only you can never say never on these things, because there's always unusual data sets that come out of these exercises, but in general speaking, I wouldn't expect there to be a significant change. Definitely not a big increase, because we only had a £5,000 cost of the MFG the year before, but it's gone this way this year because of the big increases in these three schools.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Grant and Paul. Are there any other questions? Okay, I can't see any hands up, so we're going to move to the fun that is on page 24. And excuse me as I bumble my way through these. So if we go to 3.1, 3.1, and the first item here is for our maintained primary school members only, agreeing with regard to the dedelegation budgets. I think I'm coming to Caroline, Juanita and Trudy. Are there any objections?
No.
No. Lovely, thank you very much. So 3.11 I think is agreed if there's no objections. If we come to item 2, only Keith can vote on this, and he is not present. We have had an email to say that he does agree with that, which I think we can record, but we need to officially do it in the next meeting. He has to be present to give that vote. So we have an indication for Paul and his team that has been agreed, but we'll have to come back to that at the next forum meeting when Keith is present. Item 3.13 is for all maintained schools, so everybody that we've just asked, and I think also Jenny, but I don't think Jenny is here. So I think I'm coming back to Caroline, Juanita and Trudy. Are we all happy to agree 3.13?
I am.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is agreed. 3.14, this is for all forum members with regard to pupil funding. Does anybody disagree? 3.14. Okay, that is agreed. And then 3.15 with regard to the notional SEN budget. Does anybody disagree? 3.1.5 also agreed then. Okay, we're all back in for 3.2. This looks like it's getting a little bit easier. So 3.2 is to agree that the executive member approves 3.2, 1, 2, and 3, and these are all the items that are in the papers. Does anybody disagree with 3.2? Okay, that is agreed. 3.3, again, Paul has explained about seeking permission from the Secretary of State. Anybody disagree with that? So that is agreed. 3.4, about resources and submitting the DFE performer templates. Okay, anybody disagree with 3.4? Agreed. We're nearly there. 3.5 is one that we are a decision maker for, and you've got the 3 points that are in there. Does anybody disagree with 3.5? Agreed. And then 3.6 relates to the update on the safety valve. We spent a lot of time on this last time. We've had an update from Gronya, so I think we can note 3.6.
Can I just add one item to that, please, Stuart, on the safety valve?
You want 3.7, Paul, just in case?
No, I just want to add a little point on the safety valve. I know Grant gave an update at the start. Just to confirm that the council has approved this commenced the allocation of capital funding to start the preparation work for the SEMH school. That's included in the paper, and also to include additional funding for the secondary SRP developments once hopefully we get confirmation from the DFE that they'll give us some more money to take those forward as well. But it's just important that they're approved and they're basically in our budget now, so we can get on and proceed with those. As Gronya said, we are making plans while we're waiting for the final decision, but I think that's an important part of this, is getting that money set aside so that work can actually start in earnest now.
Okay, that's good news. And those what that capital's been spent on is in the papers, isn't it? So it's just an update.
Yes, right at the very end there. There's some confirmation of what it's been spent on and the approximate amount.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. So approval of the SEMH, and we've put in the application for secondary SRP capital. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think we're probably noting that then, are we, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the note. I just wanted to emphasise that because I think that's a good piece of news.
Yeah, good news. Thank you very much. Okay, item 6, the proposal for the local authority budget. It's you again, Paul.
Yes, thank you again, Stuart. Yeah, so again, this is another annual paper. It's part of the council's consultation on its budget proposals. So this is the money that the council spends out of its own income and specific grants from government, basically. And it's a consultation is taking place with the schools forum as an interested partner, specifically around the People Directorate funding. So as I say, it's an annual one. There's a lot of information in the paper again. If you was here last year, it's a very, very similar paper, obviously, like a lot of these budget papers. Few issues change, values change, but the actual structure and the key issues within it are very similar. So it just talks through the different stages of the budget, the different elements of it. So it talks about how we're building up our commitments from previous years. If there's a full year effect from those, then the extra adjustments to the budgets need to be made to make sure that those prior decisions are fully financed going forward. It also sets out some of the government grant income we're getting and the sort of areas that we'll be looking at in terms of gathering income from council tax and business rates. And then it also sets out some of the proposals in the budget to develop services. So there's some specific budget developments in the paper for People Directorate, and they're set out in Annex B, and a lot of that centres around social care, but there are some education school related budget items in those as well. And there's also a range of economies as well that are put forward as well. And again, there are some economies associated with the People Directorate, and they are set out at Annex C if you want to have a look at those in any detail there. And then finally, I've lost my bit of paper now. Finally, there's income. So we also get other income. Sorry, it's inflation, the inflation provision. So that's obviously highlights, it picks up what you said earlier, Stuart, that there's a lot of uncertainty around inflation at the moment, and we're putting aside a bigger provision for inflation next year than we would normally do in the years preceding. Last year was a big inflation year as well, but before that, we were putting lower levels of inflation, but that's part of our overall package. And looking at all of those proposals, if they are if they're agreed, this is before increasing council tax, there would be a £6.3 million funding gap on the council's proposal. So that can be closed by increasing council tax, it can be closed by making more cost reductions, or it can be closed by using some of your one-off reserves, or a combination of those sorts of areas, all those areas. There's also some information on the proposed capital programme, and again, there's a number of schemes in there, but this focus on schools really is the maintenance side of things. Most of what's in the programme for schools is related to the DfE capital maintenance grants. That's £1.3 million, and there's also some other funding in there, mainly around some of that other housing responsibility the council has in respect of the People Directorate, and there's a project to do the security fence at College Hall as well. So that's the main parts of the capital programme. So those are the areas that we're seeking any comments from the schools forum on. As I say, there's a focus in the paper on the People Directorate's budget areas. And the recommendation is to see if there's any comments you have to make on capital or revenue. So I think that's it from me, if that's okay.
You guessed my comment, Paul. It's the assumption of a 3.5% pay award against the 1.4% increase in school funding. Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I think I just want to make a comment about the overall budget. Without, I think we all understand that all local authorities, in the end, their financial health is ultimately down to the central government's handout. And actually we all know over the last few years that that's been under significant pressure. So it's no surprise to me that Bracknell Forest, like most local authorities, are looking to make savings. I've got a couple of things. Number one, I think the shortfall you just mentioned, which can be met by council tax or reserves. I note reserves that we seem to be spending that now, and we might need to be spending it in a few years' time as well, if I seem to remember from our briefing this time just before Christmas. But secondly, increasing council tax at a time when many families in our schools are already struggling financially also has its impact, but I don't think that's the fault of Bracknell Forest Council. But actually, my point about this budget and the savings that they have to find is actually that my experience, and I suspect the experience of everybody in Schools Forum, is that when local services are cut, whether it be children's social care, or it be youth centres, or it be libraries, or all of the things that are the fabric of our local community, it is schools that pick up the pieces. It is schools that fill in the gap. It is our teachers, it is our support staff, it is our office staff, it is our pastoral support staff that are often the people that get it, because actually we are a huge point of contact for people in our community. So when those services go, or they're under pressure, and they can't do the things that they want to do, they turn to schools, and invariably we are the only organisation that can kind of be with them, and I just think that really does need to be noted. I mean, I have never felt so under pressure as a school leader. I have never seen my staff team so demoralised. I've never seen my pastoral team so under pressure, so overworked, so overwhelmed as they are now. And I just really worry about what schools are going to be expected to pick up in the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, as we see this roll through. So I know that officers here will do their very best, to keep the council working. I know that the local councillors of all parties will work really hard to look after the citizens of Bracknell. But I do think that when you're making big cuts, the impact is felt by organisations like ours. And I think as Schools Forum, I think that for me is the biggest piece of feedback that I would like councillors to hear, is that we are going to be picking up the pieces, and it's young people and it's the poorest people in our schools that are going to be most affected. So that's my piece of feedback. I've also individually made that feedback to the budget consultation, which is out at the moment. And I urge members of the School Forum, not just through this method, but also individually, to make their views known as well. Thank you, Chair.
I think they're comments that we would all echo as well. So thank you very much, Grant. Gráinne, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to provide some reassurance. So in the pack, you'll see economies and pressures. So every year, as part of the budget setting process, we go away and we actually look at what the pressures are. So what the expected demographic demand is looking like, numbers, people who are supporting the cost of those staffing. And we also look at opportunities for what we call efficiencies, doing things differently. In there is no cut in services. So because there's been such a high investment over the years in children's social care, you probably argue that sometimes it may not feel like it, but we have a very heavily invested family safeguarding model, which consists of a significant numbers of staff and people who support families over and above what many other authorities have. And where we've put the savings forward is where we have an underspend. So as part of remodelling placements and trying to increase numbers of foster carers and use less expensive residential, try and move children, it's not always easy, back into the borough with families that we're trying to support with more complexity, that reshaping relies less on residential. So at the moment where we've put forward the savings, it's where we've got the underspend, and the remodelling that we've been doing over a number of years has become fruitful, rather than you've got to now redesign everything to pull that saving out. So just to give you that reassurance from the children's social care one. So those are the areas where we've got the underspend. Where we have got some challenges, where the pressure's going up. So for the additional payments that families are asking for over and above what the set budget is for this year, and where people have asked for growth bids, we've been able to meet those growth bids to some extent, but not to the extent that people would have liked. So it's those sorts of things. So I can reassure you that there is no cut in services as part of that in terms of what we're doing. But there is pressure in how we're able to meet, difficult for us in terms of how we're able to meet the pressure that's coming through the system. So from that perspective, you are right, Grant, it's about how we need to operate with the pressures that are coming through, and whether the level of growth we can put into the budgets is the level of growth that people would ideally want us to put in. Same with the adult social care. Adult social care, as you know, nationally, that demand is going through the roof in every single local authority. Complexity, increased numbers of people with dementia with really complex needs, children going through transition, how we operate in those pathways towards independence is going to be a focus on for us. But from the older people's perspective, it is significant. So as part of that, and part of looking at how we're delivering services, we are redesigning some of the activity in our adult services to think quite differently. And part of that is looking at how we do as disabled children age through transition into adulthood, how those services are delivered and constructed so that it's services around people rather than how structured in adults and children. So it'd be interesting to see how that emerges. So there is some service redesign, but primarily in the adult space.
Thank you. Gráinne, are there any other comments? Can't see any hands up. And in that case, our recommendation, which is on page 43, was just a comment. And I think we've recorded a couple of our comments there. So thank you very much. Can I just jump back? I see Keith is in the room.
Sorry, Stuart, can I just check? Do you want any feedback on the consultation then as a forum? or is it you just make some notes for the minutes? I just want to be clear, that's all.
Help me out, Paul. What would you recommend?
No, I mean, just taking account of the comments that have been made, is that something you want to formally feed back in a set of words as part of the budget consultation?
I think it's appropriate to raise with councillors that schools have got concerns about funding levels and the amount of services and expectation that falls on schools relative to the increase in budget. I'm not sure it makes any difference, but I think it's appropriate as those that work in the sector that we have those concerns. So,
okay, yeah,
yes,
okay, yeah, we'll
yes.
be able to pick some comments up from that, and I'll make sure they get fed back to the consultation then. Thank you.
Are we happy with that? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, Keith, just so we don't have to carry an item over. On page 24, there is a recommendation. You're the only voter, 3.12. You've emailed in to say that you agree with that. Can you just confirm that for us?
Yeah, confirm.
Thank you very much, Keith. We won't have to carry that over. Okay, are there any items of other business? No. In that case, thank you all very much. The next forum meeting is 4:30 on Thursday, the 7th of March. Thanks, guys. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you then. Night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.